This is apropos. Firefighters in Canada are scrambling to keep hundreds of wildfires, including 112 considered out of control, at bay. Residents in Toronto are being urged to stay indoors if possible. There's even mounting concern that the smog left by the fires could spread into the northeastern parts of the United States, possibly impacting the World Cup final being held in New Jersey. Blazes in Canada have scorched 1.9 million hectares of land this year alone. That's an area nearly the size of Slovenia.
Just released amateur video shows a train crew trapped by thick flames near Armstrong, Ontario.
Okay, y'all need to hurry up here. Like, seriously, we're encased in flames now.
Officials say the workers have been rescued and are safe, and that train operations in the area have been temporarily suspended. There are currently more than 100 wildfires burning in the province, and winds have carried the smoke southeast, blanketing Toronto in a haze of orange smog. On Wednesday, the city topped the list for worst air quality in the world, surpassing even Delhi and Kinshasa.
You can definitely smell it, absolutely. As soon as I woke up in the morning, I went outside on my terrace, and you could definitely smell the smoke in the air, and it's very hazy out, so absolutely it's noticeable.
Officials are warning people to stay indoors if possible and to wear a mask while outside. The city, already dealing with a heat wave, is now battling hazardous air quality conditions, which will remain an issue especially for children, the elderly, and those with health conditions.
Those particles are going to contain a whole sort of soup of different chemicals and compounds. This is kind of like the earth smoking a cigarette, and we're getting the secondhand smoke from it.
And concerns are mounting that smoke from the wildfires will drift south into U.S. cities over the next few days, including New Jersey, where the World Cup final is due to be played on Sunday.
Let's cross live now to Jonathan Boucher, who is a researcher at the Canadian Forest Service. Jonathan, thank you so much for joining us on the program. So we're hearing from the latest information that there are currently 130 active wildfires in northwestern Ontario, with at least 60 out of control. You're in Ottawa. How bad is the situation there at the moment?
Well, we've seen, as you just shown, there's a bunch of people battling fires. There's smoke issues across many cities in the country, but there's also a bunch of communities that have been evacuated. So the situation is quite serious in some regions, especially in northern regions. A few weeks ago it was northern Quebec. Now it's northern Ontario. So fire management agencies are quite busy right now.
We're seeing more and more that, as humans alter the climate, fire's relationship with landscape is shifting. Are you seeing the real impacts in Canada at this time?
Oh yeah, our research has been showing that there's been increased severity and intensity of fire season in the last decades, and we are actually seeing it at a human scale. Like from season to season, we're seeing heightened fire situation with really intense blaze at large scale, but also affecting communities more and more often. We've seen in the last, let's say, 5 years, we've seen communities being directly affected with structures being burnt. So yeah, we see definitely the impact of climate change that brings warmer climates, more intense drought period that are lasting longer, but also over greater areas, and that are occurring more frequently over years, but also during a fire season.
Well, Jonathan, we heard from Mark Carney earlier talking about all the resources that have been poured in to help manage the fires. In many countries, we spend billions in fighting fires after they explode. Yet experts say money invested in prevention can save many times that in future losses. Why are governments still treating wildfires as emergencies instead of managing forests as critical infrastructure?
Well, it's always tricky to prepare for fire seasons. You know that from one season to another, there could be lots of differences, lots of different needs in terms of resource. Obviously, preparing, as you just mentioned, is the most effective way. But preparing needs to be done at many different levels, and they're not all as effective. There's sort of two or three main things for wildfires. There's fire ignitions, there's the presence of flammable fuels, but there's also the weather that's favorable or the climate. We can't really play a huge role on climate, except on the long term by reducing our carbon emission and so on. But in the short term, where we could play is on ignitions and on the fuels. Reducing ignition can be done mainly for human-made ignitions, but here in Canada, for example, half of our ignitions are being triggered by lightnings, and those fires are usually hard to reach, hard to fight, and they gather in energy. So they're being even harder to fight with our resources. So another place we can play, as I said, on our human-made ignition, we can reduce them greatly, but we can also play on managing the fuels. But in so many areas in Canada, for example, we don't do forestry, we don't have extraction roads, so that those fuels are not really accessible. Like the areas are so large. You mentioned like that we're right now at 1.9 million hectare burns. That could be the size of some European countries, but that's just only a small fraction of the country. So like the areas to be treated are so huge. So we can mostly play at the scale of the communities and at the individual, reducing the human ignitions really.
The numbers are staggering. Jonathan, you'll be aware that, we've been struggling with fires here in Europe, especially in Fontainebleau, just southeast of Paris. We've had 2 fires scorch thousands of hectares of land. An investigation is now open into how they started. But what do you think we here in Europe can learn from Canadians? You have so much experience in battling fires when it comes to managing wildfires.
Yeah, well, again, as you mentioned, there's so much we can do at actually battling those fires. At some point, they gather so much, like they're producing so much intensity, so much heat, that even our strongest mean of suppression, which are usually air tankers, are not effective anymore. Sometimes they can't even fly too close to that amount of heat release, or even with the air turbulence that it creates, but also most often the water don't even reach the flame or the fuel, and it evaporates before actually reaching it. So I think most countries have decent resources for fighting fires. Obviously, sometimes they need help from outside, but we can really work at reducing human ignitions, obviously, but also work at trying to reduce the flammability of our landscape by sometimes managing the different species that are growing, that are being kept there, trying to keep less flammable species. We know, for example, conifer trees like spruce or pines are more flammable than most deciduous tree species. All of the connectivity from the surface fuel to the crown, leading to crown fire initiation. So if we can reduce that in some way, obviously it can't be done at large scale, but at smaller scale, that's a possibility. And all of the dead fuel and the fine fuel, the litter on the ground, this is what's really reactive. So, when you have like long period of drought, really high temperature, for a few days, those dead fuel present in a forest or in a park become really accessible for fire, and they're really ripe for ignition and create intense fire.
Well, as we've been mentioning, climate change is making fires bigger and droughts longer. But we've also made so many technological advances. We have satellites, AI, drones that can really help us to reduce the risk. Is there just a lack of political will and long-term investment in forest conservation? Because clearly we have the tools.
Yeah, well, I think it's more than political will. It's a whole of society problem. Like people can take action on their own land parcel, on their own, the structure that they own, on their own capacity to ignite or rather stop potential ignitions. So it's a whole of community, the preparedness of a community for being able to evacuate or shelter in place. So it's not just the main governments that plays a role here. It's everyone that can play an important role in preventing the destructive effects of wildfires. Yes, you said we have the tools, but we have to be still investing in science, because with climate change, we're getting into a situation that we haven't really dealt with before in terms of how extreme the situations are becoming, but also since it's more extreme now, fire has the ability to burn in areas that it wasn't able to burn in the future because it may have not been dry enough. The trees were too healthy, for example. But now with climate change and pests, for example, that can encroach into different areas. So the challenges are becoming more and more important. Again, closer to communities, so brings more complexity to those challenges. So even though we have the tools, we need to be, I think, better prepared and better organized, and keep investing in science so that we can develop better tools to prevent or even predict and forecast those events.
Jonathan, thank you so much for joining us on the program. Great to get your analysis on this.
Thanks
Thank you for your time.